Ari Wasserman published his Bubble Watch column on Sunday. It's very confusing, Ari, and I know from doing bracketology that trying to figure out who the bottom part of the playoff bracket is, whether that's who's coming out of the group of five or who are the last at larges in, is going to be wild. And right now, it feels like there is such a logjam of teams that could be in the bottom of the bracket or could be on the outside looking in, and their resumes are all very similar.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that if we could start at the Big 12. Who do you pick to win the Big 12, Andy, was a really, really tough thing for me. But when I looked at BYU's resume and what they were able to do to Kansas State last weekend, and then seeing more results for Kansas State, having, now whooped Arizona and Oklahoma State, on top of a win against SMU that's looking better and better, like BYU, I mean, legitimately could be in the top 10. And I don't know that would be a crazy thing to say. So, they have gotten off to a great start. I also struggled with what to do with the SEC, Andy, because the Georgia-Alabama game led to me making the toughest move I had to make, which was to move Tennessee down to 8, because at a certain point, it just can't be all top 7 teams are from the SEC. And it's like, who do you pick between when you have Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, and Texas? Like, it's just a hard thing to do.
We're go ahead and get Georgia, Texas, and Georgia, Tennessee to help us sort that out.
Yeah.
I mean, but right now it's not, there's no way.
But it's like, I have Tennessee number 3 in my top 10, but I have them number 8 in the projection because it's impossible right now. Even though I want to pick Tennessee to be higher than those teams because of the epic battle that we watched on Saturday night. I also struggled with, but actually made peace with the notion of Mizzou and Ole Miss both dropping out of the field, even though both of these teams were supposed to be pretty good or very good this year, and both of these teams have very advantageous paths. Like, they don't have the same toughness of schedule that you'll see with, like, Tennessee, for instance, who's got to play Alabama and Georgia this year. And one had a clunker against Vanderbilt, and that was Mizzou, almost lost in overtime to Vandy. And then, of course, Ole Miss lost to Kentucky on Saturday. And I think that those two teams are teams that I've had in the field because I didn't think that they played a schedule that was tough enough to knock them out of the fold. But now they're on the outside looking in, and it was difficult.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, Missouri's going to go to Texas A&M this week. That could be a really nice win for them. Vegas has Texas A&M favored in that game by 1.5. Now, Vegas has loved Texas A&M all year. I will point that out. But Missouri's got to win that. Ole Miss, meanwhile, going to South Carolina. Like, I feel like if they win that, and they're actually favored by 9.5 points, which I feel like is an obscene number of points given what we saw in the Kentucky game. But it also may be a styles make fights thing. And Ole Miss, let's say they go to Columbia, they win handily. Like, you have no problem probably next week putting Ole Miss in the field again.
Yeah. And that's the thing that makes me feel comfortable making these moves because, as results come in, it's very easy to make those adjustments on a week-to-week basis. We can only do this based on what we know and what we feel in the moment. I mean, it was a little difficult for me to put Michigan as a team that was the first 4 out because right now they have 2 consecutive wins with Alex Orji as a starting quarterback, but I know in my gut that it's not going to finish this way. But at the same time, who else do you rationally put over there? Because I didn't want to put USC ahead of them, even though I think they've got a better chance of actually being the first 4 out because Michigan just beat them last weekend. So, like, you start getting in this pretzel where it's what do you actually think is going to happen and what do the results tell you is going to happen? And a lot of times, Andy, and I'm sure you had this with bracketology too, where it's like, sometimes you just have to go with your gut, but do you pick gut or do you take hard facts of what happened already? Because you have this Michigan, USC, LSU tandem here, and they've all beaten each other. And Michigan is the highest ranked team here.
I like getting out of the assumptions. I feel like we are now out of the assumption zone that we've got enough results that we can. And that's why in bracketology, I left Ole Miss out of the field entirely because all of that would be is our preseason assumptions. They haven't actually beaten anybody yet. I need to see them play against South Carolina and LSU and Oklahoma. And then, I'm going to feel very much better about them if they beat all those teams. But if they don't, then we'll know.
Well, can we lock in on that preseason assumptions thing for a second? Because I think that's important.
Sure. Yeah.
Because that is a huge deal when it comes to, like, for me, I had Notre Dame in my field. Okay. And I struggle with this because part of it is podcast bit that we have here. Part of it is preseason notion, and part of it is beating Texas A&M and now Louisville. So when you say preseason notion or preseason assumptions, do you feel like our preseason assumptions about teams are sharper now than they were 5 years ago? And when you talk about preseason assumptions, don't you also have to take into account that how good the players on the team are? I think we know more about the players that are on these teams now than we did 6 or 7 years ago. Like, I think that we have more information. Any sharper, you don't?
The problem is now the rosters change so much from year to year with the transfer portal. So we think like Florida State's a great example of this. Our preseason assumption of Florida State was that they'd be not as good as last year, but still pretty good. They're terrible, just legitimately terrible. And so, no, I don't think we know as much. And the fact that the rosters are changing as much as they are makes it even harder. So that's what I'm happy that we've got, in a lot of cases, 5 games of data. Think about this. I mean, one more game and most of the teams are halfway through their regular season, which makes me a little sad. Like, this has been a fun college football season so far. I don't want it to ever end. Now I'm like, wait, we're going to be at the halfway mark? What are we doing
when I was
here?
typing out the records last night, I was like, damn, this month has gone by quickly. But yeah, no, you're right. But the thing that I have a hard time with is that in some cases you have a lot of data, and then in other cases you are still basically clinging to your preseason notion. Well, actually, we have a huge important data point for Ole Miss. They lost a game
with Kentucky. Yeah,
like I'm talking about Mizzou though. Like, you want to talk about a team that you only have preseason judgments on. You have 3 blowouts against overmatched teams and an overtime game against Vanderbilt and a whole lot of
and the Boston College game isn't that helpful. Because Boston College, like, they've won their other games, but they weren't by that much. And they were against teams like the Michigan State wins. Yeah, okay, that's good. But then, I just don't know what Mizzou is yet. Interested to see them against Texas A&M. Also, as you look forward in the week, like Mizzou, Texas A&M, some of these big games this week, I hope you're checking out Prize Picks, checking out the board, checking out which players they've got for how many yards, how many touchdowns. Use the code STAPLES. Play $5, get $50 instantly to play. Prize Picks is America's best daily fantasy game. And remember, it's not just all college football. So we're recording this on a Sunday. You got 2 Monday night football games. You got the Titans and the Dolphins. You got the Seahawks and the Lions. You got a lot of fun options on Prize Picks that you could just use to liven up the first day of your work week. So go to Prize Picks, use the code STAPLES, play $5, get $50 instantly. Have a little fun all week because they do have it all at Prize Picks. Ari, let's talk Notre Dame because you mentioned we got a little podcast bit about this. Notre Dame's win against Louisville was excellent. That's their best win of the season. Louisville, I felt like probably handed them the game in the first half, but Notre Dame took it, which with this Notre Dame team, we weren't sure they were going to do that.
Yeah. Are we 100% sure that was the best one of their season?
Maybe not.
Yeah.
I feel like it is.
I think they've got 2 really good wins and one horrific loss. But going on the road to A&M in the first week of the season, I know Connor Wegman was playing.
The A&M game is probably going to look like if A&M beats Missouri, the A&M win is going to look amazing. It's going to be the crown jewel. I still think Louisville can be very competitive in the ACC. So
you also get a different A&M too, because the A&M that Notre Dame beat was led by Connor Wegman, and Marcel Reed right now is their quarterback, and they've looked like a really good team with different leadership. So I don't know. All I know is going into Kyle Field in week 1 and gutting out that win physically was impressive to me. So so
what the thing is, they might be lucky that they played A&M when they did, because this version of A&M might have been able to beat them, but it doesn't matter. The game happened when it did. It was a good win, and Notre Dame's in good spot. And Notre Dame.
Well, did you give any thought to Notre Dame going into your field, or is it still too soon for you? Okay,
it's pretty I'm just imagining the deluge on social media when the graphic comes out. Don't you know they lost to Northern Illinois? Didn't you see the Northern Illinois game? I'm not ready for that yet, Ari. But if they keep winning, yes. Now, that schedule that we think is so pillowy soft. So Navy and Army starting to look like wagons. I don't know about Navy and Army against Notre Dame. I don't know about Notre Dame against Navy and Army. Like this could be fun.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of excited about that. Plus, they do play Georgia Tech in Atlanta. Now, not at Bobby Dodd Stadium, 2 miles away at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is probably like going to be about a 50-50 crowd. But Georgia Tech's not a gimme either.
I'm going to put you in a pretzel right now. You ready?
Okay.
The number one thing that we had said about Notre Dame's schedule before the year is that they probably have less margin for error because there's not a lot of opportunity for big-time quality wins. And we've been talking about, you know where this is going. Yeah. And we've talked about how Notre Dame has to run the table after losing to Northern Illinois because there isn't going to be that tentpole victory on their schedule that's going to prop them up at the end of the year. What if Notre Dame, and I think I put them at 8 in my poll, right? So, sorry, not 8, 11. I'm an idiot. 11.
Yeah.
Which is exactly where they would be if they were to lose another game that they shouldn't lose. But then all of a sudden, Army and Navy wins, prop them up, and they beat USC at the end of the. I think there is still a pathway for this team to be number 11 with 2 losses. Like I think that they are more close to be in than people are ready to admit right now. Like I feel like I'm on the cutting edge of this one.
That is very interesting and a very good point. If we could see the schedule again, let me lay out a path for a 10-2 Notre Dame. So you keep winning, you lose to Navy, but beat Army and USC. Army then beats. Well, it's possible Army could play Navy in the American Championship game. So the actual Army-Navy game will not happen until after the playoff is set. But it's possible that we will get a first Army-Navy game in the American Championship game the week before the scheduled Army-Navy game. So let's say this happens. Army and Navy continue to run through the American. Now, look, the idea of anybody going undefeated in their conference, I realize is hard to imagine. But let's say the Army and Navy are running through the American. And then Notre Dame loses to Navy, but beats Army, and Army beats Navy, and Notre Dame beats USC, and USC doesn't lose again. Like Notre Dame would then have some really good wins, especially if Texas A&M has wound up having a good season.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, the NIU game is just a forgivable loss and a flicker of our imagination of something that happened 2 months earlier that we're not talking about anymore, which happens all the time in the sport. We get hyper-focused on things that happened in September, they're embarrassing, and then all of a sudden November comes and it's like not even a discussion anymore. So, yes. And the other one that people are a little bit uncomfortable with, but is important to know, is like Clemson's emergence now as a team that may or may not win the ACC, but a team that seems to me is going to be firmly in the mix to be in this field.
I think if Clemson keeps playing the way it is with the schedule it has, it is going to be the ACC championship game. So at the very least, it will have a puncher's chance of getting into the playoff. Now, it could drop another game, go into the ACC championship game at 10-2, and if they lose, they'd probably be out. But if they keep winning the way they are, they would go in at 11-1. They might not even have to win it. It depends on who they're playing. I mean, it could be, like an 11-1 or undefeated Miami. We'll see. I mean, the Louisville game that Clemson has in a few weeks, I think that's an important one in the ACC. I think the South Carolina one's an important one in the context of their playoff situation. So we'll see how this goes, but I think you're right. Clemson absolutely is improving, and that Georgia game looked terrible, but you keep winning like this, it's not going to matter.
Yep, absolutely. So, and again, we have to accept the notion that the teams that are on the bubble are going to be ranked in between 11 and 17, and teams that are ranking between 11 and 17 often have 2 or even 3 losses. So
Are not all
these
that
are the teams.
different.
And the thing that's interesting is that when people get fired up about the bubble watch stuff, is that they go, have you watched Michigan play this year? They can't throw the football. And it's like, yeah, but they're still probably 18 or 16, which is really
because they do
right on the
other
bubble.
things well. Like,
Yeah.
they all have flaws. If they didn't have flaws, they'd be number 3.
Yes. So like you are picking between a bunch of teams that there's a lot not to like about. And then when you're ranking the top 5 teams in the country, that's when it's a layup. That's when it's like, oh wow, all these teams are great. They're awesome. Like I don't know who's the better. So that's when you start getting into like 12 teams to figure out what 8 spots or 6 spots are there in the back end. It's a really difficult proposition, Andy.
Absolutely right, Ari. But it's fun to watch and it's fun to argue about, and we'll be doing it all season here at On3.